Hey everyone, this is Josh from Solopreneur Grind for episode 63 of the Solopreneur Grind podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, it's the first ever video podcast that we're doing for Solopreneur Grind. So I'm super excited to have with us today Ryan James Miller, who is a business coach and consultant. We'll get into a lot more details on that. Ryan, really appreciate you coming on the show today.
What's up, Josh? Thanks for having me, man. I really appreciate it.
It's our pleasure. Really interested to hear more about your story. Love the background. Love the whiteboard. Could you please tell us a little bit more about who Ryan James Miller is?
Oh man, we could go on for days. It's ugly.
It's a big question.
Yeah. So present day, I am a husband to a wife of 19 years. I have two daughters that are 18 and 10. That's a whole lot of fun.
Could be a whole episode right there.
Yeah, in days of quarantine in close quarters, it gets more challenging. I am a pastor of a small church in Fullerton, California. I've been doing that since 2012. And then professionally, I started my business in 2011 after actually getting laid off of a large publicly traded company due to financial cuts that were being made. And so I started a business in the sales world, speaking, coaching, training, consulting, and figured it out from there through a significant number of bumps and bruises. I feel like we're in another one of those cycles now, but we'll just see. But yeah, today, I mean, I coach traditionally high-performing entrepreneurs, salespeople, C-level executives, and then I consult a lot of organizations on sales business development strategy, and then do speaking on everything from what people would consider motivational kind of keynotes to workshops and seminars.
Very cool. There's a lot to dive into there. Yeah. I will quickly note, I will date this episode April 1st, 2020, not because it's April Fool's, but because we are mid-quarantine. So just for people listening in the future, that those were the bumps that Ryan was referring to. Ryan, I'd love to hear more about what you were doing in that corporate job leading up to 2011. And then, we can get into kind of the entrepreneurial journey, but what was it that you started out your career doing or were doing in that role?
Yeah, so I actually started in sales in 1998. That was the result of I was working in a warehouse for a performance parts company in the automotive industry. Was getting dirty all the time, didn't like it. I saw all these clean people inside and I just wanted to get clean. I just wanted air conditioning. I didn't want to be in a sweaty warehouse. It took me 6 months to convince the owner at that time to let me get a job. So I started an inside sales role there, probably mid-1998. That carried me on to the automotive industry, on into the final employed job I had was for a large document management and print company. So a company that used to do blueprints for the construction industry became a digital translation of those documents and transmission. And so I went to work there during the time I worked there, which was 2006 to 2011. They went from a very successful 60-year family-owned business to a publicly traded company. And through that time, I grew from a top performing salesperson in the organization to regional sales manager. I was actually in a leadership development program and management training program that I was going to be sent out to one of our other 200 some odd divisions to run one of those divisions somewhere across the country. And then, as we all know, the recession of 2008 hit, and it did just an absolute disaster to our business for a lot of reasons. But being publicly traded, unfortunately, you often answer to investors. And so that's what they were doing towards the end there. And when the stock price fell from 35 down to about 7, it was just absolute carnage. And I was put back into sales. I had some leadership responsibility, but was selling. And I was the top salesperson, and I was actually cut as a result of being a top earner. And so it was a good financial decision for them at the time, but it caused me to have to pivot.
Right. Well, before we get into that next step, I'd love to hear more about your experience with sales, and maybe if you could talk about what you think led to that success, right? Because even before the entrepreneurial journey started, it sounds like you were doing very well for yourself. You were very good at sales, which all of our entrepreneurs, solopreneurs are going to have to do at least a little bit in their journey. So I always find when I have guests that are good at sales, I definitely want to spend some time talking about that too.
Yeah. So it's interesting because I would have said during that entire time of my career, even after I'd gotten laid off, that the reason that I was good at sales was because of my personality, that I'm a outspoken extrovert. I have no problem getting in front of people. I don't love rejection, but I can deal with it. I knew how to convince people to get them to the place I wanted them to go in terms of, you have some implied need. I can figure out a way to make the solution work for you. So I very much believed that was the reason why I was successful, was because of who I was made to be, in the kind of quote unquote character traits of a salesperson. As I look back now and have a better understanding for what it really means to sell, I don't believe that any of that played a role. As a matter of fact, a lot of those things I think actually hindered me from becoming more successful than I was. What I really believe it was two things. One was I was always willing to just bare my soul and be myself. And I've definitely gotten better about that over time, that willingness to just kind of be open and transparent. But I was always just very honest with people about the reality of what I was trying to do and where I was trying to go. But the second thing was I was very much focused on people. And even when I was trying to close a sale for my own good and my own goal, I always had those people in mind, like their budget, their business need, their personal challenge that they were overcoming. So I was willing to sit and listen to them, to talk with them, to spend time with them. And so I was building community and building relationships. And so because there became this like common ground that we could sit on, which was, I'm just going to be me, you're just going to be you, and we're going to figure out a way to get through this together. Then people were just attracted to that in me. And so they were willing to give me a shot. They were willing to give me their business. They were willing to stay with me if I made a mistake, or if the company that I was working for delivered a bad product or service. Like, I was able to overcome a lot of those challenges. And really that's how I was able to get into business, even though it was really, really hard. Those are the same character traits that really helped me become successful in business. So it wasn't
Right.
what a lot of people say is the necessity to sales. I think it's something that in many ways is a total mindset shift, that it took me a long time to realize.
Got it. And we'll probably get back into the topic of sales as we get into your businesses, but that's makes a lot of sense, and really interesting to note how your kind of mindset for what you thought caused that success really changed as you grew and learned as a person. So you get laid off, which I still think is a little ironic that they fire someone because they cost a lot of money, but it's the person who might be making them the most amount of money. So chicken or the egg. But so what happens next, right? You get fired. It's the middle of the recession. What were you thinking? Was it totally a surprise? Did you take some time off to kind of recoup? Like, what was that reaction? And I think this answer will be especially fitting given what we're going through right now.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was absolutely blown away. I mean, it was a Monday morning. My boss called me into his office, and we sit down, and it was about 30 miles away from where I officed. So I was in our corporate office, and he says, "Hey," he goes, "I brought you in this morning to let you know that I have to let you go." And I was like, "Come on, man, like, quit messing with me. Like, I got work to do. I got clients to go see. Like, I don't have time for this garbage this morning." And he's like, No. I really have to let you go." And so I took a second. I had grown a lot kind of personally in those last couple of years. So I was able to collect myself. And I said, "Look, man," I said, "I think I'm your best salesperson." I said, "You have a decision to make." And really, I knew that was just from the top, just trickling down. He was a yes man at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just took it, and I said, "Okay, thank you." And he was waiting for an argument. He actually said, "What, you're not going to like disagree with me?" I said, "No, I said my piece. I'm just going to go about my business." And I called my wife on the way home, who at that time, our daughters would have been probably, 2 and 9, so 9 and 2. My wife stayed at home, no job. We had a mortgage, and when I called her, she just broke down crying. And I said to her, I said, look, I said, we just have to trust that God has provided for us to this point. And so if that's the case, as much as we don't like what's about to happen, we just need to believe that it's going to work out. So I started interviewing for jobs right away. I thought I would do that first. A couple months in, or no, about a month in, probably about 3 weeks in, I went home to her one day after interviewing for a large organization, a really large national company for a sales position. And I just said, you know what? I said, I just don't think that I can go work for anybody else. I think that this is just the time that I finally, because I'd always felt like one day I would do that. My dad was an entrepreneur. He owned multiple businesses. And so she was fully in support of that. Well, right about that time, a friend of mine came to me and he actually said, hey, he says, why don't you come work for us? They were a competitor to the company I'd gotten laid off from. He says, we can do the same thing here. And I'm like, I don't know if I want to do that. Okay, fine. So I actually did that for 6 months. It was one of the worst decisions I've ever made in my life. I won't
Why
get
do you
into
say
too many.
that?
Well, I won't get into too many details
Right.
because people can go look at my job history.
Right.
But they were not what they said they were, and it was apparent very quickly. Not my friend. My friend actually had the wool pulled over his eyes too. It just wasn't an organization I was going to work for.
Right.
And so 6 months. Went back out on my own. And so probably November, December of 2011 is when my wife and I together decided that we were going to give it a go. What was craziest was by that time, because of a month off, because of changing jobs, taking a bit of a pay cut, going back to then another month off. By the time I started my business, and we were not wise spenders or savers at that time. I didn't have a dad in my life at that time. I just didn't have a lot of good guidance financially. And so when I started my business, we had $500 in our checking account. We had no
Jeez.
savings account. We had no 401k. I had no wealthy family. And I had a mortgage that was due right within a couple of weeks. And I had to put food on the table. And
Wow.
so for me, it was go time, right? I had no choice but to make this work, because if not, things were going to get a lot uglier than they were at that moment.
Right. That's a good segue. So what did you decide in terms of, did you have a business idea in mind, business plan, talking to clients, take us to that stage?
Yeah, so I had an idea. There was a man that actually I'm still connected to this day. He was a corporate trainer for us at that big company I worked for. And I loved when he came in and he taught, and he was like so zen. And it was all about productivity and time management and individual leadership and like sales awareness, but more from like the mindset perspective, before mindset was a cool thing to talk about.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to do that. And I had always been an outspoken leader, and I had done some like training, but just kind of like internally. And so that's what I felt I wanted to do. The problem is you just can't do that day one. So as I was trying to kind of figure out my business model, I was just picking up work wherever I could. And one of the easiest things that I was able to do was, because I came from the printing industry, is I started brokering printing work. So, I mean, t-shirts, business cards, flyers, like you name it, I was brokering work for it. And the thing that was so brutal, and I finally had to cut myself off from doing it, is I was hustling my ass off to make 10% profit on $100, print job. Like that just wasn't going to pay the bills. And yet it was taking so much work.
Right.
But that gave us a little bit of cushion. And as that was happening, then I was going to colleagues, friends, and I'm like, look like, I can help you with sales. I can help you come up with a strategy. And I was doing it for whatever they would pay me. Like in the beginning, it was just, I will do anything that you ask. I will do my best at it. You just give me what you think you can. So I still have some of those agreements from 2012, and they're crazy because
Yeah.
it's things that, this is not a brag, this is just the reality. Like, I mean, I was probably charging at times 5% of what I'm able to charge sometimes now, and a lot of times I was actually doing far more than I'm even doing now for so much less. So yeah, it was crazy.
Right.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the business almost took it naturally kind of evolved. Like you started with kind of what you had to do, and then
Mhm.
you still kind of had to do what you had to do for whatever people would be willing to pay. But then it sort of evolved into what you were really good at, stuff like sales, which is something that has a pretty clear value to people because you can see a numerical output from those efforts.
Yep.
So at that point, like, what was it? Because it's easy to say, I went in and I basically offered to help them for whatever they could give me.
Mhm.
What would you recommend to people starting out right now? Like if they're starting out, similar situation to you, and maybe they have a really strong skill in sales, or maybe it's accounting or web development or whatever. Would you recommend taking that approach to going, finding some clients and saying, hey, I'll do whatever the heck you need related to this that I'm really good at, you pay me what you want? Or would you have taken a different approach looking back?
Yeah, so let me be transparently honest. So you dated this episode. I've been running a successful business now for the last couple of years. It's hit a really good groove. I actually operate three separate businesses, and yet 3 weeks ago I took a significant five-figure a month hit as the result of the coronavirus outbreak. And so two things happen when that happens. Number one is like income quickly, like all comfort income is all gone, right? So
Hmm.
that's number one. Um, and number two is I have all this free time on my hands. And so I'm doing the same thing now that I did back then. It's for a little bit different of a reason, but my recommendation to anybody, and now I believe is actually a phenomenal time to start a business. Like there is probably no better time for you to start a business than right now,
Yeah.
because we are going to see a significant spike in the economy over the next 12 to 18 months. We're gonna hurt for a little bit, but when we turn, it's going to turn fast, and the people that have put in the work are gonna be able to succeed. So all that to say, I believe that, like, you've got to put all pride aside. You have to put all of this is what I should get, this is what I expect to get. If you're in business truly to deliver a service to other people, which means you really want to help other people, whether that's with a product or service, but that you really want to help other people with whatever it is you offer, then do that, deliver value, and allow them at least early on, allow them to determine what that value is worth to them. Over time, as you grow and get better at it, you could start to turn that. But the good thing that happens in there, by the way, and this is one of the biggest reasons why I'm doing this, is because there's people that are in need, and there's people that can't afford to, like, I've been doing a lot of virtual workshops right now for remote companies. Well, I mean, I could charge $500 to $2,500 to do a 45-minute to 1 hour virtual workshop. I have in the past, I do regularly, and right now my commitment to people has been, I will do anything for you in this 1 hour time domain within kind of like these specific areas that I speak to. You name your price. And if that price is zero, there is no shame in that. And I am absolutely 100% willing to do that, because it's my opportunity to help people. And it's not because
Right.
my income is padded, because I need money. I need to put food on the table again. But I just believe that my service can provide value in ways that money will never replace anyway.
Right. Right. Yeah, and it's almost kind of playing to the environment too, in the sense that a lot of us don't have much disposable income right now, but you
Right.
can still build that trust, provide that value,
Mm-hmm.
provide that goodwill. And generally, if you do good stuff like that and provide value to the world, it finds a funny way of coming back to you. Very cool, Ryan. So you start a few of these, let's call them engagements, with your first few clients for whatever the price was that they were happy with. What happened next? Like, what were those next kind of 6 to 12 months like? Did that period go on for a while, or at what point did you kind of hit that groove you were talking about, maybe start charging more, and like, let's call it, go to the next level?
Yeah, so I started at the end of 2011. 2012 was probably one of the most brutal years of my life financially. No, it was the most brutal year of my life financially. So much so that if not for the graciousness of our friends, our family, our local church, literally like dropping gift cards off in our mailbox for restaurants and grocery stores, checks, cashier's checks with nobody's name on them, to help us buy, I would have never made it. And I was
Wow.
such a prideful human being going into that season of life that I wouldn't even take help from my own family before that. And yet I was humbled to the point where it was like, I not only did I need this, but this was other people's way of contributing to my life. And so I needed to let it go and just and let it happen. So that's how we got through the majority of 2012. Um, Early in 2013, I did hit a really good groove, and that went on for almost a year, till about the beginning of 2014, and
Mhm.
then
Can you
in
go into the details? Like what can you define what you meant by groove? Did you start getting referrals, ongoing clients? Like what and what was the click that kind of happened there?
Yeah, so it was a couple of things. So I think that I was as confident as I was going into business. I think that I was finding a place where I was really confident in what I was delivering. So I think that, we can say in our head that we've got this, but until we start producing results for people, I think that it's a false sense of confidence, or it's just a different type of confidence. And
Hmm.
so that was becoming clear to me. Even at the end of 2012, when financially we were still hurting, I was gaining more confidence in my ability to deliver. So that was a big thing. Two was because I was able to deliver, then people were beginning to talk a little bit about me just in local circles, right? Like nothing
Hmm.
big, but so I was getting some referrals because I had helped other people. So that was number two. And number three was I was getting more clear in terms of the process by which I was delivering my product and service to the people that I was working with. So whereas before, I would say, hey, let me help you with your sales process. Now I can say, like, and it's still being refined, day in and day out. But like when I go to consult for an organization now, I've got 5 steps. I articulate those, and by the time my engagement's done, I deliver an entire playbook over to you that will outlive me, as long as your company outlives us both.
Hmm.
And so, process was really big. So those were the 3 things that were really important. And as that was happening, I just kept pushing the threshold of price. I believe my value was far more than what I was delivering anyway, but I had to slowly build into that. And I mean, to this day, I've still never had a client tell me outright no, strictly because of price. And so I think that that's important, is as we continue to evolve as business owners, especially entrepreneurs or small business owners, I think that you need to continue to push that threshold of delivering value and asking for more and more in return until you find that ceiling. Because I would venture to say that probably 90% of business owners and entrepreneurs out there have not come anywhere close to that ceiling, but they're
Hmm.
too afraid to push it farther.
Got it. Yeah, I would totally agree, especially as you're evolving from, we'll call it like a newbie entrepreneur, and you're used to having to scrap your way to even get those
Yeah.
sales. It's then weird to make that adjustment to be raising your prices, doubling your prices, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that those are some really good thoughts. Okay, so then what happened after that year?
Yeah. So, 2000, beginning of 2014, it was like March-ish. And in a 3-week period, I lost 60% of my income due to 2 client acquisitions. So just they got bought out, they didn't need me anymore, or weren't approved to use me. I think it was 1 and 1. And then the other one, our engagement just ended. It was time to be done. It was a long-standing engagement. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm back in hell. Like I
Hmm.
cannot believe that I've been in this groove for a damn near year. And like we have extra money as a family. We're starting to like, enjoy going out to eat and doing things. And now it's like, what the hell's going to happen here? So I had this, probably one of the most pivotal moments. I probably had 3 or 4 professionally in my life. And one of them was this one. So I had been sending out monthly email newsletters And one day I got this snarky response from a guy that I didn't even recognize his name. So I don't know how he found his way on my email list. I probably spammed him or something, but he responded to me. And so I looked him up on LinkedIn, and he looked like a really proven professional. He was local to my area, really good guy. His name was Dean. And so I'm like, I'm going to respond. So I responded back to him and said, hey, don't know how you found your way on to my email list. I said, I would love to connect over coffee or something like that. And he obliged. And so within like 2 weeks, we went down, or I went down to meet him for lunch, and we sat for 90 minutes, maybe 2 hours. And at the end of that time, for the first time in my life, I had nothing in the moment to offer of value to this person. Like, he was successful, he was networked, he was dialed in. And so I had, again, this huge humbling moment. And I said to him, I said, Dean, I said, I have to be honest with you. I said, I always come into these types of conversations getting ready to provide some sort of value. I said, there's nothing that I can offer you at this time. I said, I have to be connected to your network. I said, the type of people that you are around are the type of people that I need to be doing business with. And it's really going to help me get my business back and going again. Within 2 weeks, he had provided referrals that more than replaced all that income I had lost a month earlier.
Jeez.
Like, it was unreal. And so that's the awesome part of the story. But the growth for me was this willingness just to be honest and say, like, I need you. Like, which is crazy, right? Because I told you, like 2 years earlier, I was broken down, and, people were forcing themselves on me to help us financially. Now here I am needing to learn that lesson 2 years later, which is the same thing, which is like, idiot, when are you going to realize that you need people? Like, you can't do this on your own.
Right.
And so, kind of like I don't even want to say the end, but, what's been really cool is over the last year or so, it's been working in the reverse with he and I. He's been a mentor to me for years, and I've actually been able to invest into him, into his business over the last year and a half. So it's been pretty amazing that I've been able to return the favor, but I never thought I would be able to. So it was just a really cool moment for me professionally.
Very cool. And I think there's like a whole book of lessons you could take from that story beyond what you just said. Like, what I'm pulling from it, even just off the top of my head, is number one, having the email list to begin with, right? If you weren't doing that, there's no connection there. Number two, the willingness to then humble yourself based on whatever his comment was, respond to his email, ask to meet up, right? Because a lot of people will respond, but it is some extra effort, and usually worth it, to actually reach out, ask for coffee, ask for lunch, whatever it was. And then, actually at the lunch itself, like you said, being humbled, being honest, being open. And you'd be surprised, if you are those things, what other people might do for you.
Yeah.
So that's really great. So would you say then, Ryan, that since then that was a bit of a tipping point, and things have been, let's say, like smoother sailing until a month ago since then? Or how's the rest of your career shaped out up until now?
Ha ha. No. So that went a year. And one of the referrals that that Dean actually passed to me, that went from a 2-hour a week engagement to about a 2-day a week engagement.
Oh, wow.
And then in the beginning of 2015, they actually offered me a full-time role to come in and lead their sales team. Great CEO, good people, but I didn't want a job. And so I pushed it for a month. Like, I just, nope, I'm not good. And then finally the COO called me from a conference in Chicago that she was at. And she said, we finally come to the conclusion, we have to put somebody in this place. If it's not you, it's somebody else. And so I said, okay, let me talk to my wife. I hadn't even told my wife yet, because I was like, this is not for us.
Right.
And let's pray about it and we'll see what happens. So I went and talked to my wife. My wife's like, I think you should take it. It's stability. Yes, you've been doing well, because now my business was doing really well. But it's stability, it's benefits. And so I was talking to my coach at the time. I was talking to friends and other like people that I confided in, and, and could provide some wisdom. And I took that job. and hesitantly, because again, I was doing well, but I just, for my family, it was a good season. So I thought that was going to be 7 to 10 years of in that business, and then I would get back into doing what I was doing. So kind of provide some cushion, go back to work for myself, and then that company. So that was June of 2015. I went to work there. In January of 2017, that company dissolved its individual entity, joined together with a bunch of other companies across the country to form kind of a national organization that was private equity backed. A lot of good came of that, but there was some challenges that were being faced, and I was having these like nightmares from years past when I watched this family-owned business go publicly traded. It wasn't quite that bad, but still there were some challenges.
Right.
So I was writing out 2017, and we started having some interpersonal conflict because they wanted to see sales run a certain way. I just didn't believe that was the right way to do things. So I was regularly having to protect my people, and it was just a difference of opinion. So as 2017 was coming to a close, in October of 2017, my wife and I and 5 of our friends were in the crowd at the concert in Las Vegas when the mass shooting took place.
Wow.
And
Jeez.
and one of our best friends that was with us, I was standing shoulder to shoulder with. She was one of the 58 that was killed that night.
Wow.
And so, obviously, that's a huge moment, and just, changes your world anyway. But my company was really gracious, do what you need to do. And so about 2 weeks later, I went back to work. I just needed like some normalcy to work. And I was sitting in my office, and I had this moment. It was so interesting. I literally said to myself, what in the hell are you doing with your life? And it was such an ironic question because I was habitual. I was disciplined. Like if you saw my calendar, my morning routine, my workout structure, like it was dialed. I was making good money. We were having some interpersonal conflict at work, but nothing crazy. But yet it was this like call to like, are you really doing what you should be doing? And so from that conversation with myself, then with my executive coach at the time, with my wife, with a couple of close friends, we worked through it. And in May of 2018, unbeknownst to anybody else, I walked in and resigned my job to my boss and went back full steam ahead into consulting and coaching. And again, at that time, I had a little bit of a cushion, but I had no clients. And so it was almost like starting all over again.
Right.
And so then what I would say was from that point to mid 2018 until a month ago, things have been phenomenal. Like literally 2019 was the most financially successful year of our lives as a family. It was the most fulfilling year of my life personally. It was really, really amazing. That we have a bump in the road, but I'm not pessimistic to it yet.
Right. That's really incredible, Ryan. And I do appreciate you going into such detail because I think it's very important, right? Like that's actually one of the reasons why I even started this podcast to begin with, was that people, we don't really get the true appreciation of the struggle. We see, your website, we see other people's Instagram pages, we see the end results. And we don't always get to appreciate what went into that, the story behind it. So I really do appreciate your honesty. As you referred to earlier, it seems to be a common trait, which is awesome. There were a lot of resets for you, and we've had at this point over 60 other successful solopreneurs on the show. Most of them have one, maybe two resets, right? Maybe like you get fired and then they start their business, and then eventually their business does well. For you, for a variety of reasons, there were multiple restarts and you were still able to come back from them, and now better than ever. What would you recommend to people, or what would you think are the 2 or 3 things you can say that people should focus on when they're at that starting point? Because like you mentioned earlier, now is a great time. Some people, due to necessity or just due to the opportunity, because there are a lot of opportunities out there today, will be starting up soon or have already started. What would you say your 2 or 3 best pieces of advice are?
So So one of the first things I think is super important, especially when we're facing a season of some sort of challenge or difficulty. This can be even if you do this by choice, but um, you have to ask the why question, but not why is this happening to me? I, that can be part of it, but I think that we need to take a big step back and understand why this situation is happening at all. Because
Mhm.
we may be going through a challenge that has nothing to do with us. Like we are just a vessel or a vehicle by which we are going to be able to support, encourage, grow somebody else. And it sucks that we have to be the one to bear the crap, but that may be the reason. And so when it's just why me or why is this happening to me, I think that it's just, I understand because I ask that question of myself. I've asked it a lot. So I'm not
Mhm.
saying I haven't done it, but I just think that that's a narrow question to ask when it's a much broader opportunity for us to ask the why question. So that's
Right.
number one. Number two then is how do I grow through this? that that has got to be the next question that we ask. So once we understand just from the macro, like why is this going on, like right now, again, right, we're in this season of like we don't know. Like yes, we understand that there's this virus and there's these things spreading and like all these challenges are happening, but what's the point? Like it's far more than just like we came up short and being able to deliver quickly on like medical necessity or something like that. Like it's big. So we've got to make sure we ask that question. But then it's okay, so how do I grow from this? What do I learn from this? And that for me has been the biggest like opportunity in my entire life. Because even if you were to ask that question in the midst of like if it's with your spouse or with a boss or with a friend, and you have a challenging conversation, you have a difference of opinion, you have an argument, you have a fight, you have a war, it's like, how can I grow from this? Not what's my responsibility in this, not like what's their fault, like not like nothing. How can I grow from this? We always have some sense of or some sort of responsibility. And so that has given me, I believe, a level of self-awareness that not many people truly have. They will say they do, but they don't. And that's actually what I believe is one of my greatest gifts as a coach, is the fact that I have become so self-aware with still a ton of room to grow that I'm able to help other people do the same thing. So that's the second question then is so then growth personally. And then the third question is what can I do for other people? And so that then turns to how can I, again, regardless of the situation that I'm facing, good, bad, or indifferent, how can I find a way with the seat I'm sitting in and the situation that I'm in right now? How can I help somebody else through whatever they're going through? Because I believe that does two things. That helps us, maybe even all three, maybe that helps us with that big macro challenge anyway, or big macro question, but it helps us to demonstrate those moments of self-reflection around self-awareness, like how I'm growing.
Mhm.
It makes us feel good, right? It's fulfilling. Even when we're down in the gutter, when we can help somebody else up out of the gutter, it feels really freaking good. So that's there, but also I feel like it begins to help us showcase our strongest skills, our strongest gifts and talents. And so, like you brought up accounting earlier, which is like numbers, like I'm good at them, I hate them.
Mhm.
And so, but yet think about it, like as an accountant right now, or somebody in the financial world, like nobody knows like what the hell their personal finances, their company's finances, or the government's finances are going to look like, other than we can at least say that one's going to be ugly a year from now or 6
Mhm.
months from now. But if you have a gift in that area and you could sit down with me and help me actually understand what those numbers are for me and how I can best set myself up moving forward, oh my gosh, like that's a huge gift. And I think
Mhm.
that we can do that. Like I have a friend that's an artist, and right now she's really struggling financially, and she was successful going into this. And so she has been drawing personal portraits of other people, really small personal portraits, like $15 a piece. She's been posting them on Instagram. And yes, that helps her business, but it's been giving people the opportunity to watch themselves be drawn, because in addition to the portrait, she's also sending them the video of the process, like the time-lapse video for actually painting them.
Right.
And so it makes them feel so good. And so she's blessing them by doing that. She is continuing to refine her skills and what she's really good at and loves to do. So I think just those three questions are so important. Like all the rest of them, I think begin to be naturally answered as we start taking steps. But it's those three that I think we often skip over because we automatically go to, okay, so what does my product have to look like in order for me to make money?
Right.
And that's important. Don't get me wrong. We need to make money or we don't eat. But I just feel like that's a natural outcome of, I need to get clear on what I'm good at and how I can help other people.
Absolutely. No, those are three pretty great questions, some of which I'll probably reflect on at some point this week. Ryan, you alluded to a few minutes ago about having a great routine. I'm interested to know, have you maintained it, and what was it, and or what is it right now? And morning, evening routine, daily, weekly routine, and how is that attributed to any success?
Yeah. Okay. So I have this process by which I coach people too. So I always test things out on myself far before I put them on other people. And so one of the big things I did going into 2019 was I scrapped all my goals. I did not set a single goal in 2019. That was the first time in at least 10 years I didn't do that. And so my kind of my test on myself was, if I just got clear on who I was and then produced or executed on the actions, the functions that I believed that was that person, I think I can live a really fulfilled life, and I think I can really do well. It seemed to work out really well. And so what those were for me, I call them functions, but basically that's habits and disciplines. Those things all centered around who I was and what was important to me. So those were, so first is, and again, I don't believe that this is a necessity for everybody. This is just a description of what's worked for me. So I get up at 4:59 I had been getting up at 4:59 every single morning. I'll tell you how I've pivoted in the last couple of weeks, but 4:59. And the reason it was 4:59, it was because I just wanted the principle of beating the clock to 5 a.m. There was just something about that. It was just something inside my head. The most important thing there, though, was, and this is what I believe is should be prescription for everybody, is I didn't hit snooze. And I don't care what time you get up at 10 a.m. That's fine. Just don't hit snooze, because I believe that, like, we've committed to a time of waking up. And when we hit snooze, we have failed our first opportunity to win in the morning. So that was number one, was that. Then between 4:59, when I got up out of bed, and 6 a.m., which is when I step into the gym, I CrossFit. And so it's a 6 a.m. class, 6 to 7 a.m. But I had a disciplined habit of not touching my phone, going to my Bible, reading that first, some passage of scripture. Second was I was reading the Morning Brew every single morning, just a great short hit of information, out in the world today. I love the way that they write. Then I would read 15 minutes of some book that I had, and then I would go off to the gym. And so I was able to do all those things before I even got into the gym. Then I would go to the gym. And so by 7 o'clock, I was home. I would get showered, take my kid to school. So that part of the day was critical for me because it set the rest of my day into motion, and it really fueled all these small wins that helped my mindset be right as I was going forward for the rest of the day.
Right.
Now, by the way, the other big thing that I focused on in terms of habit and routine, and this started in 2019 as well, was a minimum of 7 hours of sleep a night. I used to be the 4 to 5 hour guy, like I was Superman and I could do it. Then I started reading all of these studies around just how bad that is for your cognitive brain function, and then just health overall. And as I focused on that, that became huge. So that means I have to go to bed by, be laying down by like 9:30. So I'm like dead asleep by 10 o'clock. And I wear a Whoop strap to help me do that. So So that was important. How that's pivoted, because this is important for people to know, is like, so my gym is closed right now. And so I can't get into the gym at 6, and I cannot be working out in the garage, dropping weights from overhead at 6 o'clock in the morning, because my kids will lose their mind.
Mm-hmm.
So, so then because I'm breaking that routine, I'm now susceptible to picking up my phone, to just goofing around, to doing some other things. So I've had to fight for a routine, but now, and actually it's just been this week, I've pivoted to, actually I had to wake up at 4:30 on Monday, but I'm up by 7 o'clock, and I'm trying to follow the same habits of reading before I get started on my day. But then getting started on my day now is, now I start working, I'm producing content, I'm virtually working with clients, and then I'm hitting my gym time later on in the afternoon, when it's just more appropriate for me to be able to do it at home.
Got it. And what about in the evening? Anything specific? How do you, what do you do right before bed? How important is that? Because I find getting up early, which is, you know, hugely beneficial, I feel like half that battle is just making sure you get to bed early enough. Then it becomes a lot easier, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So, so this is really, really hard. But yeah, so it's, again, making sure my whole family knows that at 9:30 I'm going to bed. And with an 18-year-old that is impervious to the world, and a 10-year-old that thinks that she is, and then a wife who typically stays up a little bit later, that was a shift, and it still has been kind of a fight. And so as much as my wife and I try to go to bed together every single night at the same moment, sometimes I just have to get up and say I'm going to bed. And that's not good for my marriage long term. That's not good for my sex life long term. And so it's going to take a shift. But because we're all in this together, especially my wife, she has fought really hard to help along that route as well. A couple of other things that were super helpful. Post Route 91 shooting, I started dealing with a lot more anxiety and was having trouble, especially falling asleep. Just visions and dreams, and some of that stuff has subsided, but still the anxiety is there. And so I started taking CBD. It's a mix of CBD and melatonin. And so that's been super helpful about helping with sleep consistency. And then not too long ago, one of my clients is one of the largest distributors of the blue light blocking glasses. And so he was awesome. He hooked my whole family up with blue light blocking glasses. We haven't been as good about wearing them lately because, again, we're just all so off of routine. But putting those things on an hour before bed has been super helpful as well. And then, in bed, like no touching devices, like, they're in do not disturb mode. And so those things have been really helpful to try and get to bed earlier. But again, the last couple of weeks have been a lot more challenging because just everybody's routine is off, and it's just really easy to sit on the couch and Netflix. Oh,
Sure.
by the way, the one other thing I should say, and I'm sorry, I kind of like run on with some of these things, but so especially as an entrepreneur, I think one of the most important things that we need to do is make sure that we are not sacrificing one side of life for another. I don't believe in work-life balance. I believe that these things are all integrated together. But for me, that was so important that I have committed to, I shut my work off by 6 o'clock every single night, just as if I was working at a company and able to come home. Now, there's extenuating circumstances where I do some things after hours, but that's rare. And so that's been helpful for my evening routine too, because I don't get caught up in a bunch of work stuff for hours on end. That's taking away from my family time. That's taking away from my sleep. That then ruins my morning routine.
Yeah. And it's so easy, especially when you're working from home, to not have that kind of end of the day time slotted, and then next thing you know, it's 6:30, and then the next day it's 7 and 7:30, etc.
Yep.
Ryan, this has been extremely insightful for a long variety of reasons. I really appreciate it. One last question is, what would your last piece or two of advice be to people given the circumstances right now? If you could almost kind of summarize your approach, or if you have like a guiding principle or two in terms of business, especially given the circumstances right now, what would you want to leave people with?
Yeah, so it sounds really fluffy, but it's super duper practical. And it is, if you want the most out of the life that you have been given to live, you have got to be more of yourself. And so that means you have to know yourself, you have to be yourself, and then you have to become the best version of yourself. I mean, that's what it is all about. It's the most fulfilling thing that we can do. It will likely produce the most reward, whether that's very practical financial or just this fulfillment and freedom. And so really that for me is what I speak the most about. If you're watching this, my hat says it, be authentic. It's a brand that I represent. And it's just super duper important for me to help people become that person. And then I help them practically apply that to, their career and different roles that they're in and sales and all types of other things.
Awesome. Great message and great segue into my last question, which is if people like what they heard, if they want to find out more, if they want to work with you, where can they find out about you, your company, social media, any of that good stuff?
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time on LinkedIn and Instagram. And so I'm sure you can share those links in the notes for people. But those are two places on social. And then my website, I'm actually getting ready to launch the next round of my foundations group coaching. So that is virtual Zoom meetings with 4 to 6 people total. I facilitate every conversation. And we've been getting a lot of traction helping people to build that foundation and then really produce far more, both in their business life and in their personal life. And so you can find that by going to my website, ryanjamesmiller.com/foundations. And that will, next group will launch at the end of April. And then another one will launch about 2 weeks later.
Awesome. And we'll have links to all those in the description, whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on your favorite platform. Ryan, thanks again for coming on the show, being honest with us, being open about your history, the ups, the downs, the restarts, and your personal strategies, personal life too. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, Josh. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.